Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep into something really interesting. The curious case of Brigitte Macron.
Oh, this is going to be good.
So you sent over a bunch of excerpts from Candace Owens' commentary, and they all focus on like this weird thing about the French First Lady.
Oh,
Just the lack of
yeah.
information about her life before she was a teacher. It's
Yeah,
like a puzzle, but someone lost like half the pieces.
absolutely. And that's what makes it so fascinating. We're not talking about like, someone who lived like ages ago.
Right.
This is the wife of like a major world leader right now when like everything is online.
Yeah.
But her early life is just poof gone.
Like it's not a total media blackout, right? Like there are biographies and documentaries and stuff.
Right.
They just kind of skip over huge chunks of her life.
Yeah,
It's so strange.
so strange. It makes you wonder, like, is it possible that the French media is like really carefully building this like image of her? And instead of like, digging into all the gaps in her history, they're just focusing on portraying her as this like free-spirited woman who like rebelled against her conservative upbringing.
I see what you mean. Like they highlight her love of miniskirts and rock music and, how captivating she was in the classroom.
Exactly.
It's almost like they're creating a character
Yeah.
instead of showing us the real person.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that make people even more curious about her past?
You'd think, right? But it seems like it kind of worked, at least for a while.
Okay, so then where do we even start with this whole mystery?
Well, the visual evidence we have is like a good place to start.
Okay,
There are only two photographs that have ever been released from her supposed childhood,
okay.
one from her first communion, and then one family portrait.
And those two photos, instead of like clearing things up, just created even more questions, right?
Yeah.
Like the first communion photo sparked all this debate because
Yeah.
people were saying it looked more like her daughter Tefane than a young Brigitte. I mean, is it possible that it's a case of mistaken identity or even like photo manipulation?
It's one of the theories going around. And it's interesting that Tefane was the only one of Brigitte's children who agreed to be in that documentary.
Oh, yeah, you're talking about Virginia Linhart's documentary.
Yeah, exactly.
She's like a really well-respected filmmaker, and even she hit roadblocks when she tried to look into Brigitte's past.
Yeah.
It shows you how controlled everything is around Brigitte.
Totally. She describes running into this like wall of silence when she tried to like really dig into Brigitte's early life.
Wow.
And even with her reputation, she was like closely watched.
Really?
They were super restrictive with the information she could access.
That's disturbing.
It really is.
So it wasn't just the photos, right? Linhart also talked about how hard it was to find out anything about Brigitte's ex-husband.
Oh, yeah, Andre Louis Auzier.
Yeah, who she was married to for like over 30 years.
It's wild how little we know about him. We're not talking about like state secrets or anything. He's just this like regular guy who happened to be married to someone who became super famous.
Right.
But even the photo of him on Wikipedia was wrong.
What?
Yeah, it was actually another teacher from the school.
That's crazy. It makes you wonder what they're hiding so hard.
Right. If they're obscuring even these basic details about her life, what else could they be keeping under wraps?
Okay, so like, what about this new brother that suddenly shows up in the family portrait? Jean-Michel Trogne.
Oh, yeah.
There's literally no mention of him anywhere before this photo.
Yeah.
Was he always part of the family? And if he was, why introduce him now?
It's like they're like rewriting history right in front of us,
Right.
like carefully choosing what to show and what to hide.
And then there's Jean-Michel's son,
Jean-Jacques.
who looks a lot like
Up for it.
Emmanuel Macron.
Oh, yeah.
Coincidence? Maybe, but it's definitely suspicious.
It definitely adds to the whole mystery. And speaking of Emmanuel Macron, his background is surprisingly similar to Brigitte's.
How
There's also a lot of missing info and this carefully constructed narrative.
interesting.
Even his classmates said he was really enigmatic, like someone who kept his personal life very private.
So we have these two people, both with these gaps and inconsistencies in their pasts.
Yeah.
And they end up as like the most powerful couple in France.
It is kind of starting to feel like a political thriller, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah. It really does, and that feeling gets even stronger when you look at Emmanuel Macron's family.
Okay.
So we know his dad, Jean-Michel Macron, was a neuropsychiatrist, and his mom, Françoise Noguez, was a pediatrician.
Yeah, but those professions, especially his father's, take on a whole new meaning when you think about the political climate in France back then.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I remember reading this book called Two Young French Women by Hervé Algalaranda,
Right.
and it talks about Macron's upbringing and suggests that his father's work might have put him in contact with some pretty shady people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Algalaranda hints at connections between Jean-Michel Macron and people involved in the Algerian War. Oh, wow.
which was like a super messy period in French history.
Right.
There were all these stories about psychiatrists being used to like silence dissidents and even do experiments on people they thought were dangerous.
That's terrifying. Could Macron's father have been involved in that kind of stuff?
It's hard to say for sure without more evidence, but it makes you wonder how his father's work might have shaped Emmanuel's views on politics and power.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of influence, Algalaranda also mentions Macron's mom's side of the family, the Noguais, who were from the Haute-Pyrénées region.
That's the same region where Macron made up that story about his great-grandparents speaking Penaud.
Right, which isn't even a real language.
Exactly. And, it might seem like a small thing, but it shows that he's willing to like make stuff up even about his own family history.
Yeah,
So if he's okay with doing that, what else could he be hiding or changing?
good question. It makes you wonder if there's a pattern here, right? He invents details about his ancestors, skips the commemoration of the Battle of Amiens, even though his family has deep ties to the region. Yeah.
And he focuses his political ambitions on areas further north where, coincidentally, Brigitte happened to work as a press secretary.
It's almost like he's trying to distance himself from his past, but at the same time, he's using those connections to get ahead. And this detachment even extends to his own family.
What do you mean?
Remember that story about how Macron turned to Brigitte when a local official asked him about his own sister?
Oh, yeah.
It's just strange. It suggests that he relies on his wife for even basic information about his own relatives.
It's all so weird.
Uh-huh.
Are we seeing a calculated attempt to control everything, or are these just random coincidences?
It's hard to say for sure, but let's go back to Brigitte for a second.
Okay.
We were talking about the mysterious appearance of her brother Jean-Michel and his son Jean-Jacques, who, as we said, looks a lot like Emmanuel.
Yeah, what about them?
Well, the biggest question is why was Jean-Michel, who seems like a pretty important member of the family, missing from all the previous stories and documents?
Yeah.
Was he intentionally erased from the narrative until he magically reappeared in that family portrait?
And if so, why?
It's like someone was trying to rewrite history very carefully, choosing what information the public gets to see.
But who would benefit from that kind of manipulation?
Yeah.
Could this be tied to the powerful families and all the political stuff we were talking about earlier?
It's definitely possible. Remember, we're dealing with families who have deep roots in a specific region and connections that go back generations.
Right.
Their stories are all tangled up together, and any secrets they have are probably shared. And sometimes the tiniest details can reveal the most important truths.
Like what?
Like the fact that Jean-Michel's name doesn't show up in any articles or books about Brigitte's family before that photo came out.
Right.
It's like he was a ghost until someone decided to bring him back to life.
That's a really interesting point.
Mhm.
It makes it seem like they were hiding him on purpose and maybe hiding something else too.
Right.
But what could it be? And who would have the power to pull off a cover-up like that?
To answer that, we need to look closer at the history of the Pujol and Crogneau families. They were like the big players in Amiens with connections to both the business world and the politicians.
Yeah.
Their influence was everywhere, and their secrets, if they had any, could be really damaging.
So are you saying that Brigitte's past and the reasons why it's so mysterious might be connected to something her family did?
It's a pretty convincing theory. Think about it.
Yeah.
We have a family with wealth influence and a history of political involvement.
Yeah.
We have a daughter who marries a young man with a shady past and a potentially controversial family background.
Right.
And we have a media that seems more interested in creating a certain image than in finding the truth.
It's all starting to make sense.
Right. It paints a pretty interesting picture.
But there's still so many unanswered questions. Where do we even begin to untangle all of this?
I think it's time to focus on the person who seems to be at the center of all this mystery. Brigitte's mother, Simone Pujol.
Okay.
Her story and her connections might be the key to figuring out this whole thing.
Simone Pujol. Okay. Brigitte's mother. So you're saying that she's the key to understand this whole thing?
I think she's like a really important piece.
Yeah.
So Simone was born into this family. The Pujols, they were like a dynasty in the Amiens region.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were chocolatiers, confectioners, you know. Their business was like a huge part of the local economy for generations.
It's like a real-life Willy Wonka story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But with way more political intrigue.
Okay, so not just money and chocolate, but political power too. This family was connected.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And Simone's brother, Jean Pujol, he wasn't just satisfied with chocolate. He was the mayor of Amiens for years.
Wow, so he was a powerful guy.
Yeah, really powerful. And this is the background, when Simone married Albert Trogne, Brigitte's father,
Okay.
he also came from a family in the confectionery business. So it wasn't just a marriage, it was like this merger of two super powerful families.
Right.
It really solidified their control over Amiens.
So Brigitte grows up surrounded by all this wealth, political connections, this legacy that goes back generations.
Yeah.
That makes you think maybe this need for control and secrecy is something she, inherited.
It could be. We see this tendency with both Brigitte and Emmanuel, this need to control the narrative.
Right.
It's like they're protecting not just themselves, but the legacy of these families they're tied to. What's interesting is that this need for control might come from things that happen way before they were even born.
Wait, what do you mean? Are you saying that the mysteries surrounding Brigitte and Emmanuel might be connected to something that happened in the past?
Yeah.
Something to do with their families?
I think it's something to think about. Like families like the Pujols and the Trognu with all their power and influence, they probably have some secrets.
Right, every family does.
Yeah, but these secrets could be big enough to really hurt their reputations and their power.
So the lack of information about Brigitte's past, this whole carefully crafted story, the missing brother who suddenly reappears, it's all to protect the family name from some scandal.
Could be. And remember, we're not just talking about a reputation. We're
Right.
talking about protecting their legacy, their influence, their control over the region.
Mhm.
These families build empires, and they'll do anything to keep them.
This is crazy. We started by looking at Brigitte Macron, and now we're uncovering this web of family secrets, power struggles, maybe even a cover-up.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a reminder that the past never really goes away, especially when it comes to powerful families.
Right.
The choices they made, the secrets they kept, it all affects the present.
So what does all of this mean for us? What's the takeaway from this deep dive?
I think the big takeaway is that things are rarely what they seem, especially with powerful people. The perfect images, the polished stories, the missing pieces, it should all make us question things, look deeper,
And remember that the most interesting mysteries aren't always in some hidden tomb or something.
Yeah.
They're often right in front of us in the lives of the people who shape our world.
Exactly. So the next time you see a picture-perfect politician or celebrity, remember what we talked about today.
Right.
Remember, there's probably more to the story, and don't be afraid to ask what's really going on and who's benefiting from keeping it quiet.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop searching for the truth. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.